Welcome to Globlal View. Join us on this multi-visual journey around the world.
A small number of people in the scheme of things protesting to begin with, very few of whom committed acts of violence, but that few was systematic in their efforts to harm police officers and to create damage to police vehicles, to storefronts, to other property. And again, that's not going to get us anywhere. But now it is time for people to go home.
Chinese investment in the UK covers a diverse range of sectors, from energy to real estate, technology and entertainment. Over the past 9 years, China invested more than $55 billion into the UK, the highest in Europe. And in 2018, the UK was the largest European investor into China, as exports in goods and services reached $83.7 billion. But hopes that deeper economic ties would lead to political liberalisation in China are fading.
The country has not moved forward with liberalisation and democratisation to the extent that we hoped, and has instead moved into a different trajectory, one that is increasingly authoritarian and revisionist.
A recent report by conservative think tank Henry Jackson Society said that the US, UK, Australia, Canada and New Zealand, those are the countries that make up the powerful Five Eyes intelligence sharing community, are strategically dependent on China. Its analysis shows the UK is reliant on China for 57 separate categories of what's classed as critical goods. These include active pharmaceutical ingredients used for painkillers, antibiotics and antiviral medicine.
And so we have an unlevel playing field that makes it hard for companies in the UK to compete with Chinese companies because you're really competing with the Chinese government.
Gibson said China gained the global dominant share in pharmaceuticals by undercutting and using unfair trade practices, not because their products were better quality. One example is from 2018 when the FDA recalled blood pressure medication made in China, which was found to be contaminated with a cancer-causing toxin.
The world is dependent on China for thousands and thousands of medicines that are used in hospitals every day, including those that are needed to treat people with COVID-19. People want to trust the medicines and the personal protective gear coming from China, but its track record is really very, very concerning.
President Trump recently awarded a new US company a contract to manufacture drugs and pharmaceutical ingredients. It's a shift to not depend on any one country like China for critical supplies. While British Prime Minister Boris Johnson is known to historically be in favour of deals with the Chinese regime, he's facing mounting pressure to toughen his stance. More than 20 British lawmakers wrote to the International Trade Secretary last week, seeking to amend a bill to reduce dependency on critical goods from China. A new group was recently set up by UK lawmakers to debate policies towards China. It follows calls from some that the Chinese state should face a reckoning for its handling of the pandemic.
Another planned peaceful protest, this time in Santa Monica, Huntington Beach, Long Beach, and downtown LA, marching for justice and for George Floyd.
George Floyd! George Floyd! George Floyd!
Sadly, around 3 Sunday afternoon, violence erupted in Santa Monica. People seen breaking windows of storefronts. and running off with armfuls of stolen goods all across the city. Meanwhile, others were seen spray painting and kicking in the windows at a Santa Monica courthouse and damaging buildings all across the coastal town. The mayor there quickly enacting a 4 p.m. curfew. Police then faced with getting peaceful protesters and a separate group of rioters off the street using beanbag guns and tear gas. People clashing with police and each other. A viewer sharing this video says a man tries helping a woman who was pushed off her bike. He's seen swinging a hockey stick for protection and then is attacked and brutally beat by several people nearby. And then this in Pasadena. A truck speeds through a crowd of people. Violence erupting all across the Southland. People burning cop cars and buildings as emergency personnel try to keep up. This just after dozens of businesses were broken into, shattered, and others burned down the night before.
My dad owns this store. He's an 81-year-old man that has his whole livelihood in the store, and they looted it and they burned everything down.
It's Via Milano on Melrose, and now it's gutted.
He has no other income. We don't know what to do for him now. We have to maybe open some fund for him because that was the only source of income he had. My mom passed away about 3 years ago, and all my mom's jewelry and her old clothes that my dad had connection to it was in the store. Everything is gone. Everything is stolen.
These criminal acts are not protest. They are not statements. These are crimes that harm innocent American citizens. The First Amendment guarantees the right of the people to peaceably assemble. What we saw last night in Washington and across the country was not that. To that end, President Trump is demanding action to protect American citizens, to protect American businesses. 17,000 National Guard are deployed in 24 states, but according to General Milley, only 2 states have deployed more than 1,000. There are 350,000 National Guard available overall, and for the lawlessness we are seeing, far more needs to be done. Governors across the country must act, deploy the National Guard as it's fit, and protect American communities. As President Trump has said repeatedly, it's very important that we have peaceful protesters and support the rights of peaceful protesters, but we cannot allow a situation like what happened in Minneapolis to descend further into lawless anarchy and chaos. And we understand that very well. And with that, I'll take questions. Yes.
The anarchists, you said this morning that the president is focused right now on rooting out Antifa. George Floyd did not die in Antifa custody, he died in police custody. What's the president doing to reform policing tactics and excessive use of force by police?
Yeah, so it's an important question for sure. And this president, if you look at the actions his DOJ has taken, there's a civil rights investigation into the death of Ahmaud Arbery. There's a civil rights investigation into the death of George Floyd. It is a tragedy what we saw. I mentioned to you that the president was extremely upset when he saw that video, and he continues to, the DOJ continues to pursue those charges, and he's recognized injustices for a long time since he was a candidate. He talked about Sandra Bland and what a terrible video that was too. So he recognizes injustices where they are, but at the same time, he also recognizes that we can't allow organized groups like Antifa to commit some of the heinous acts that we've seen.
Kayleigh, in his call with the governors, the president said that he had put General Milley in charge of all this. What does that mean?
Yeah, so...
in charge of policing American streets, what do you mean?
So I'm not going to get ahead of any actions that will be announced, but what I will say to you is this, that he has had 2 briefings today with Secretary Esper and AG Barr, and General Milley was there, and there will be additional federal assets deployed across the nation. There will be a central command center in conjunction with the state and local governments that will include General Milley, Secretary Esper, and AG Barr, but I won't go any further in announcing what actions.
Can you explain what the president meant when he told the governors, I have put General Milley in charge? What does that mean? Because that sounds like a total break here. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff being in charge of a domestic issue.
And ensuring that, as the president has said, and this has been taken out of context, by the way, that our streets are dominated with a police force and with a National Guard presence. So that, let me explain a little bit about how this works. If there's a peaceful protest, police will form a line. What we've seen are those lines have been overwhelmed by massive protests that have turned into riots, the peaceful protests to be distinguished from the riots we've seen. And when those lines are overwhelmed, law enforcement gets on the defense. So what the president has said is he wants to dominate the streets with National Guard, with the police presence, and what studies have shown, as General Milley noted, he was in that governor's call, and his points all pertain to the National Guard. And he noted that there are several studies that when there's an overwhelming National Guard present, it actually de-escalates the situation and causes less civil unrest. So General Milley has really been on point in talking about the National Guard, the effectiveness, and ensuring that they're utilized to great effect across the country.
Well, let's take it out of context, because I mean, I have the exact quote. It's a very simple one. He just says that he has put General Milley in charge.
No, I wasn't suggesting that quote was out of context. The dominate. I've seen some networks that have talked about dominating protesters, and I've been around the president all day. Anytime he's used the word dominate, it was with regard to dominating the streets and ensuring that we have peace in our streets.
Stanley Ho, the man who built a gambling empire from scratch in Macau, has died at 98. Ho became one of Asia's richest men, a tycoon in the former Portuguese colony, who headed one of the world's most lucrative gaming businesses. His SJM Holdings owns 19 casinos in Macau, including the iconic Grand Lisboa. Ho also spearheaded Macau's junket VIP system. It sees middlemen act on behalf of casinos by granting credit to gamblers and taking responsibility themselves for collecting the debts. U.S. regulators said Ho was linked to triads or criminal gangs, which he denied. But his swashbuckling business style and philanthropic work won him admiration in Macau and nearby Hong Kong. He lost a 4-decade monopoly on Macau's casinos when the city opened up to competition in 2002. His firm now faces 5 other casino operators, including U.S. billionaire Sheldon Adelson's Sands China. Ho was born in Hong Kong and had 4 wives and 17 known children. In 2012, he was forced to restructure his business after a legal feud erupted within the family over his fortune. Analysts say they don't expect his death to greatly impact day-to-day operations. Some of Ho's children became successful gaming operators in their own right. Daughter Pansy is the co-chair of MGM Resorts' Macau unit, while son Lawrence runs Melco Resorts and Entertainment, which includes the City of Dreams and Studio City resorts.